Hi, everybody. How's it going? I hope you're all doing well and having a good week so far. Just sorry, I didn't realize it would go so live so quickly. But anyways, I'm here. I'm ready to go and excited to bring to you episode 18 of FemGineer Chats. So today I wanted to talk about Australia's legislative landscape. It's really important to kind of start to address this now. There is an upcoming election that will happen in May of 2022. So really great to start having this conversation early and really get people to understand how they can start to use their votes for driving the climate agenda. I think that's just a really important space to try and talk about and bring up in conversation. So I am just checking that I am live and that it is good to go. It looks like it is all good. So anyways, thank you so much for joining me. And yeah, let's get into it. So for those of you who don't know about what happened in the last election in Australia, it was really gearing up to be a climate vote. And unfortunately, what happened was the Conservative Party really started speaking to the people about job security. And that was by pushing the Carmichael mine, which is a coal mine, proposal in Queensland. And so Queensland's vote really threw the whole country's vote off. And this is not to blame Queenslanders as such. It's really just to talk about why they voted this way and, how that story around job security and talking to people's hearts and talking about, that patriotic view of a really great, thriving country is what the politicians use to their advantage to really throw the vote. And it's unfortunate because it's a very short-term thinking marketing tactic, really, that they use to try and push their agenda forward, when in reality, we have to start using our vote with a long-term view, a view that is really positioning or really putting climate action and climate diligence on top of the agenda and voting accordingly. So, Australia, we've been seen as a conservative backbencher for far too long. And, coal is still on the agenda and still part of the conversation. We don't really have a unified policy around carbon or renewables or waste. And so a lot of reasons why, Australia is really trailing behind the rest of the world. The Sustainable Development Report just of this year reported us as last out of all of the UN member nations in terms of taking action on greenhouse gas emissions. So that's really disappointing to see. I mean, we're one of the top developed countries in the world, and we should absolutely be in the top 10 is my view anyways. I think that we have an opportunity to be a really progressive country. I know that I see a lot of startup movements in this space and a lot of demand for action in this space, but unfortunately there's not a unified view on this, and it's not happening at both the individual and the business and the corporate/government levels. So that's where it really needs to happen across all of those levels. So, what are the key problems with our legislative landscape? That's probably a good place to start. So for one, climate change is really important to Australians. In fact, around 80% of Australians do believe that it is important that the governments take action on this and that it is part of our policy. But unfortunately, only 14% of the voters are actually voting based on climate change as one of their top priorities. So although they think it's important, they're not voting for climate change. And, they're usually being swayed, as with the last election, on things like job security and education and things like that. So, housing security, whatever it may be. Climate change is seen as one of the most important things for most of the voters. But when we've got three levels of government and they're not talking to each other, which we've got our federal government, we've got our state government, and then we've got our local government, and there's not a unified policy for one down the levels of government, but neither is there a unified policy across the different states or even within a state across the different local governments, so councils. And that's where the problem is. There's there's nobody really driving that unified movement. There are definitely groups out there that are trying to do some work in this space. Planet Arc, along with Circular Economy Victoria, have come out with a really great program called the Circular Advantage program, and it's about driving that circular economy within individual businesses and teaching them what they need to be thinking about and what kind of action they can start to take within their business, and really empowering them to start that conversation. So there are definitely some things happening with individual organizations, but this needs to happen within governments, and the public sector really needs to unify and talk about this collectively and really look at this problem holistically. The other problem is being look, I don't know what exactly I can blame this on. It's probably not one particular reason, but generally we take a very conservative, soft approach on the real issues in our country, in Australia. And, nobody really stands out in politics to talk about the really important issues in a very clear and direct way. And so what that does is it allows people to look at the climate crisis as not really their problem and not really a persistent or blatant problem. And therefore the destructive actions that corporations want to continue to take is driving the political agenda, because of course, corporations fund a lot of the political movements around the world. That's common. And so when you don't have anybody directly speaking out about this in a very obvious and blatant way, then nobody's out there really speaking out against the lack of climate action in our country. And so there's a problem there as well, which is what is driving the political agenda, and it's definitely not the people's voice. So if you have any questions along the way, please let me know. I just wanted to pause for a moment to say that. But what we can do here now is understand what are the drivers to make the change in our country. And I'm not going to talk about the drivers around the fact that we have a lot of, we have biodiversity loss and ecological damage and rampant extinction in our country, of animals. That's obviously really sad and more of a very personal issue. And it's not necessarily personal to everybody. So let's talk about the economics. How is it going to affect our country if we're not taking action against climate change? So there's about 200 nations, UN member nations. And so I'm just checking, I'm still live on LinkedIn. Okay, no, it's all good. So, we've got 200 UN, just thereabouts 200 UN member countries. And Australia, as I said, got ranked last on that list in terms of taking action. But if we are not taking action as the rest of them are, and COP26 comes around and Australia is still lagging behind with our commitments, which is our NDCs, our nationally determined contributions, then there are going to be carbon tariffs slapped on us really quickly and rapidly once the rest of the world starts to just, propel through this space and take action. And international trade agreements are absolutely going to be the first that are going to be targeted in this space, because all of our international trade agreements are with countries that are already far ahead of us in this space, and so we'll immediately get slapped with those carbon tariffs, as I mentioned. And what that means is a breakdown in our supply chains, a breakdown in our ability to buy some of those products that we like to enjoy. And I'm not talking about basic necessities, but just the products we like to enjoy, the luxury products, the items that we like to buy that are coming from other countries or that we are sending off to other countries, which starts to then break down our economy. So, that's obviously a more extreme progress or procession of this process. But the reality is that that's a very likely possibility that if we don't start to take action, it starts to actually break down our economy very quickly. And, so that's a key part of why the country needs to take action. Alongside that, we've had a lot of growth in terms of population, and a lot of people are wanting to come to Australia. They're learning about the lifestyle, country, well, cities like Melbourne are being rated one of the top cities in the world to live, and livability has been really great in Melbourne for a long time, despite recent lockdowns. And given that the population growth, we're needing action around climate action around how we're using our resources, because they're rapidly depleting and they're not going to be able to support our growing society, and essentially start to see a decimation of our social and our civil constructs that we've learned to grow and learn to enjoy in cities like Melbourne, I'm going to say, because, you know, they were rated one of the top cities in the world. And so we're going to see a breakdown in those things that we have always enjoyed for so long, and not going to be ranked top, that's for sure, as this continues to happen. So that's another reason, is population growth. And then finally, of course, well, not finally, but I guess another key point I do want to make is that climate change is directly affected to our health. As climate change starts to become more prevalent, you know, you're going to see more diseases spread quickly, more viral infections spread quickly, and natural disasters and the adverse effects that you see as a result of natural disasters, like smog and air pollution and noise pollution. So there are a lot of climate change disaster related effects that are going to come through, and they're going to directly affect our health. And so that's another driver for reformation in our climate policy at a government level, and I mean that across all governments. And so when it comes down to this opportunity, as I said before, 80% of Australians, or more than 80%, want to see action at a political level. And in fact, 72% said they'd be willing to incur some personal costs to see that there is an emissions reduction policy happening across their policy and across legislation. And just slightly lower to that, 60% said that of the progressive voters said that they would be willing to take a small personal cost. So ultimately, over 50% are willing to take a personal cost, whether it's a small amount or a slightly larger amount. We're willing to pay for this. So this is another reason why, you know, there is an opportunity here and support here for action being taken. So what I really want to implore the Australians out there is to not to throw your vote. You know, I know that, politics have never really been important to me in the past, but as I've started to work in this space and become more directed in my passion around climate change and sustainability, you know, I know how important our vote is, and each of your individual votes does count, and it also then drives the conversations that you're having with people. So your opportunity for change as an individual is, 1, to not throw your vote, 2, to be informed, and 3, to talk to others about, you know, what you've learned so far and why you're voting this way, and why climate change is at the top of your agenda in how you're voting. So I really think that that's so important. And, you know, when you're not sure about something, look it up. There are some really great references and material that can support your knowledge gap and kind of help you understand what's the best way to vote. You know, I'm not necessarily saying the Greens are always the best party to vote for, but you have to look at what are the Greens doing, and maybe in collaboration with what the Labor Party is doing, which is usually that powerhouse combination that we can get climate policy out there into Australia and working for the people. So the way I see our future is, you know, at the moment, Australia is effectively standing still while the rest of the world is, you know, moving really rapidly in this space. That's including all of our strategic allies, our trading partners. And as they race towards net zero emissions and we hold back with a very passive commitment to it, we are going to see a lot of effects very quickly on our economic systems and our trade agreements, as I said, and as a result, a breakdown of our cultural or our societal constructs and the way that we enjoy life. So it's time to make that change, and I see a future with climate policy in place. I'm really positive about this upcoming election, and I'm sharing this information to empower more people to talk about it and hopefully ask the right questions and stay informed. I'm going to share some I can't think of the word. I'm going to share some references to Australian Conservation Foundation and Friends of the Earth Australia, as well as the SDGs organisation in Australia and some of the projects that are happening in commitment to the UN SDGs. So just a great way of kind of knowing more about what's out there and how we can vote for a better climate policy in Australia. And I'm really positive about this, and I'd love to talk about this as well. So if you have any questions or you have any suggestions or any corrections to make on anything I've said or whatever, I love all that conversation around this. I think it's so important. So reach out. Happy to hear from you. And thank you for joining me today and staying on here while I've managed to find my words fumbling through. It happens sometimes. Sometimes we struggle with our words. But it's really great to have you on, and hope to join me for the next 2 episodes of FemGineer Chats, which, as a note, if you haven't heard, I will be putting a pause on FemGineer Chats after episode 20. So we're on episode 18 now. And after episode 20, I'm looking to put a pause on it and maybe just look at reiterating it into something new. So keep watching this space. I'll still be posting videos and whatnot about various topics around sustainability, just not doing it under the FemGineer Chats title after episode 20. So anyways, thank you all for joining me. If you haven't caught the previous episodes and you're interested in one of the topics, then I will link my YouTube channel as well. And hope you enjoy the rest of your day and your week, and I will talk to you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.